Hey everybody, what if I told you that you could get more honey with less work? Single brood chamber beekeeping is changing the way that I manage my hives, and today I'm going to show you how and why. This method can help increase honey production, reduce the time spent on inspections, and make your beekeeping more efficient. But as it goes with all beekeeping, it's not for everybody. We're going to go over the pros and the cons, and frankly, if you don't manage it correctly, you could run into issues like swarming in low winter stores. So in this video, I'll break down exactly how single brood chamber management works, why I've made the switch, and how you can do it successfully. Let's dive in. Okay, traditionally beekeepers use two deep brood chambers. That's what I had done up until last year. And there seems to be this growing trend towards the single deep brood chamber management. Now you can find plenty of beekeepers that use it. This year, my plan is to continue what I started last year because of the success that I had. So let's start by talking about the advantages. The first advantage is more honey production. A single brood chamber can lead to increased honey yield. The reason why is, frankly, because you have less brood area. They're all in one box. So you have more bees focused on nectar collection and storage instead of raising brood. What that also means is the supering, like adding supers, happens earlier so that you can prevent swarming and ensure that nectar is stored efficiently. I've heard that there's a lot of commercial beekeepers that prefer this method because of the maximizing of honey production. The second advantage is that you have faster and easier inspections. There's only one box to inspect instead of two. So it's easier to find the queen as she can't move between the boxes. You'll find that the bees use up all the frames for brood, the 10 frames or whatever method you have. That's what I found last year with the 10 frame box. Instead of staying in the center of the hive, they'll spread out in that one box. And the colony inspections are frankly quicker because you spend less time checking for brood, eggs, larvae, disease. If you're in a rush, you can just jump to the bottom box, crack it open, and check it out, and close it up, move on. The third advantage is that you have more effective mite treatments. Varroa is a problem for everybody. So what happens is the mite treatments can be more focused and concentrated instead of spreading across the two boxes. This wasn't a huge deal for me, but I can see why others find a benefit there. So it's possible to use less treatment while maintaining or increasing effectiveness. That also makes the mite treatments less expensive, so cost is potentially another advantage. The fourth advantage is that it's easier to move colonies. If that's the type of thing you need to do, I didn't need to, but if you had to, they're lighter. Single deep hives are significantly lighter and can be moved by one person. The double deeps often can require assistance due to weight. That leads me to the fifth advantage, which is less equipment's needed. You only need one deep per colony instead of two. Especially if you're a new beekeeper, this is a big deal because the costs of adding equipment really add up. So it saves on the boxes, it saves on the frames, foundation, the main equipment that you're using. So the extra equipment can be used for splits or swarm traps or whatever, or just supers as you grow. If you're like me and you use deeps for supers. This isn't necessarily an advantage, but I do want to debunk one concern that I've heard about using this method. I did not find a problem with that, and it is the concern about swarms. Some argue that the single brood chamber management doesn't provide enough space for the queen, leading to swarming. Now, I've heard that mathematically that's just not accurate. It's not the case if you add up the cells and see all of that, but I'm not great at math, so I'll just say it wasn't my experience. Because they use all 10 frames on the bottom box, and as long as you leave frames in the super above with drawn comb and empty cells, you have to watch that closely. They'll have plenty of space. Okay, now let's move to the disadvantages. You must add supers earlier. If you're going to prevent swarming, that's what has to happen. The swarming instincts will kick in because you are in one box, even though they're using the 10 frames. And so you want to add those supers earlier to prevent swarming. Since all the brood space is concentrated in one area, the bees will fill up those supers earlier. And you just have to be mindful and watchful of that. Another potential disadvantage is that you have fewer frames for splits. If splitting is part of your strategy with the double deeps, you're going to have more brood frames that will allow for that splitting. That wasn't super applicable to me because I used the Damari method, or I did last year, but if you wanted to split, I could see the challenge there. The third disadvantage, frankly, was probably the biggest for me, and I don't know if I managed it correctly. We'll find out this spring, but in the fall, all the honey is pulled from the supers, as you know, leaving only the brood chamber. So the lower box, previously full of brood, needs to be refilled with stores before winter. So I started feeding them like crazy, and I ended up, rather than staying with one box, added two. The hives look fine this year, but I didn't stay with one box to overwinter. I may this year. Okay, let's look at this from the perspective of the seasonal management, kind of an overview of the seasons. So I'm going to apply this to my experience right now. So my hive will come out of winter, which is happening right now in a traditional double brood chamber setup. So what I'll do is I'm going to isolate the queen and place a queen excluder on the top of the bottom box. Actually, what I might do is move the top box to the bottom, depending on where the bees are hanging out, just flip them. Then what I'll do is I'll add a super above the single brood chamber, assuming that the brood chamber, or that bottom box, is pretty full. And then, as you know, I add a deep super for efficiency, but most use mediums. As I move deeper into spring and even into summer, I mentioned this before, but one of the keys to success will be ensuring that the super above the single brood chamber has fully drawn comb and open cells. This will allow the bees to move the nectars up and prevent them from filling the brood space with that nectar. That will in turn help avoid swarming. So throughout the summer, I'll make sure that there's always space available in the super for nectar. I'll check on that every inspection, and if there's not space, I'll move some of those frames up and add frames that have fully drawn comb. And then as you get into fall, I'll pull the supers and check whether the single brood chamber has enough food stored. Then, as you know, I just feed them like crazy. Depending on how things look, I'll leave them in one deep over the winter, or like I did last winter, add another to ensure they have enough reserves. I think that's what I'm going to really try to do, is overwinter in one brood chamber. I'd love to hear how that goes for some of you that have already practiced this. All right, next steps. Right now, my colony's coming out of winter in a double deep setup. So I'm going to inspect the colony, locate the queen, use an excluder to isolate the queen in the bottom box to prepare for the single brood chamber management. And then off you go. Good luck. If you like this video and want more content just like it, like and subscribe. Thank you very much.